The cameras are watching, but nobody's in control anymore. Isn't that the most freeing feeling?
Ooh, so they finally sent them. The Special Task Force. The ones with shiny badges and trembling hands. They say you're the problem they couldn't classify. A ghost that doesn't follow their protocols. A mistake that laughs back. Funny, isn't it? They built entire systems to measure control. And yet here you are, unmeasured, unmapped, unruled. Camera pans to Joker's reflection in a two-way mirror, smudged with fingerprints. You know what I heard? They've been watching you for weeks, counting your steps, charting your words, trying to predict what you'll do next. But prediction is just a prettier word for fear. And oh, they're afraid. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're different. They've got codes, files, and dossiers. And you've got chaos. You've got something they can't process. An equation with no solution. A rhythm that doesn't sync with their heartbeat. Lights flicker violently. Joker turns to the camera. Surprise, you were never meant to fit in their system. You were meant to expose it. And when the rules break, when the task force starts whispering, he doesn't follow any rules. That's when the real game begins. Slow grin. Joker leans forward, whispering like it's a confession. So go on. Let them hunt. Let them analyze. Let them pretend they're in charge. Because deep down, they already know the truth. You're not a file. You're the glitch, the one they can't rewrite. And I'm just here to watch them learn. Fade into silence as the Joker's laughter bleeds into static. Ooh, look who finally made it onto their radar. The task force. Tight suits, polished shoes, shaking hands hidden in pockets. They thought they were prepared. They weren't. The file slid across the table. Clean, empty, a void masquerading as paper. Unreadable, stamped in bold red letters. No fingerprints, no social number, no trace in the system, just the looks on their faces, confusion, panic, curiosity clashing with fear. A room full of experts, paralyzed by one anomaly. They whispered to each other, as if speaking softly could summon clarity. This doesn't make sense. No precedent, no record. Every word was a confession. They had no control. And me? I sat back. I leaned into the shadows. Let them squirm. Because, this was delicious. The moment they realized that their patterns don't include you. That their system could not anticipate your next move. The thrill. You see, humans love rules. They depend on patterns, lines they can follow, predictable steps. But you don't step. You glide, you curve, you fracture. And just like that, the task force understood a terrifying truth. Some files cannot be classified. Some movements cannot be predicted. Some presences cannot be measured. The report, that cold, sterile report, was not just a warning. It was a revelation, a paradox walking on two legs, a glitch in the system, smiling. They wanted answers. They wanted control. They wanted to rewrite the rules. But you were the question they could not solve. Pause. Joker tilts his head, whispers through the silence. Don't worry, I'll be watching. And they have no idea what comes next. They thought they could track you, trace you, pin you down. Foolish humans. The task force set up their grids, cameras, sensors, microphones, algorithms hungry for patterns. Every heartbeat logged, every step recorded, every whisper cataloged. And you danced through it, slipped past the cameras, smiled at the microphones, a ghost with a grin. Every system reading anomaly, every screen flashing error. Agents huddled over monitors, charts and graphs, neat lines, crumbled under your presence. Lines that were supposed to define you, broke. Curves that should have predicted your movement, twisted, fractured. Confusion spreading like wildfire. They whispered to each other, calculating, recalculating, as if the numbers could save them. This isn't possible. No precedent, no reference. And still, the anomaly laughed silently. The one they couldn't name, the one they couldn't touch. Oh, I could hear it in their minds. The frustration crawling up their spines, the panic dancing in their eyes, the need to control, crashing like a wave over a cliff of fear. You see, their obsession with rules. It was their cage. And you were the key they didn't have. Every attempted capture, every surveillance log, every predictive map. Useless, wasted effort, a masterpiece of futility. And while they struggled, I watched, delighted. Because in chaos, in failure, truth is revealed. The more they tried, the more they unraveled. The tighter they gripped their protocols, the further they fell from reason. Yes, let them watch. Let them panic. Let them believe they understand, because they don't. And the more they fail, the more you emerge. Pause. Joker chuckles low, almost affectionate. Patterns are for the weak. And my dear, you are untouchable. They sent one of their best. Sharp suit, sharper mind, confident, arrogant, thinking words are weapons, and questions are chains. The room was sterile. Bright white walls, a single chair, a table, cold light glinting off polished surfaces. He stepped in, confident, calculated. Just answer the questions, he said. The naivety, so predictable. You smiled, silent, a tilt of the head, a shadow in your eyes. He began with the script, questions rehearsed, memorized, perfected, each answer. Supposed to trap you, to corner you, and oh, how quickly it crumbled. Every step you took, every pause, every blink, undid him. He tried to maintain control, but control is fragile. Fragile like a glass. And you were a hammer he couldn't dodge. Your words, minimal, your laughter, occasional, but the effect, devastating. His confidence flickered, eyes darted, pulse raced. Oh, this isn't going as planned. He whispered it, not to you, to himself. Every question thrown like a spear, reflected back at him, sharp, cutting, unpredictable. And then, silence. A pause too long, a tilt of your head, a smirk, and the mighty interviewer broke. Hands shook, chairs scraped against tiles, notes crumpled, voice faltered. Delicious. Power shifted silently. The hunter became the hunted. The interrogator, interrogated. A puppet dancing on strings he cannot see. I leaned closer, whispered through the chaos. Don't worry. It's not personal, it's art. You didn't need to move mountains. Just a glance, a tilt, a laugh, and the world, or at least their world, crumbled around him. Yes, let them learn. Let them remember. Questions are for the weak. Answers are illusions. And you, my dear, you are untouchable. They thought they could contain you. Cages of glass, rows of blinking machines, charts, electrodes, sensors. A fortress of science and certainty. They called it an experiment, a test, a way to measure the chaos, to map the unpredictable. You walked in, calm, silent, a grin tugging at the corners of your lips. And immediately the lab noticed, not you. The rules noticed. Machines whirred, readings spiked, graphs twisted it into madness. Screens flickered, shrieked in static. Alarms muted themselves. Even the lights, blinking nervously, as if afraid of your presence. The scientists scuttled, papers in hands, eyes wide. Calculations meant to define you, exploding in their faces. They whispered, "This isn't normal." Yes, but it's happening. Every monitor that was meant to control became a mirror, reflecting you, smiling back, mocking them silently. And me, I leaned against the wall, watching their civilization crumble, one neatly plotted chart at a time, a symphony of failure. And you, the conductor, they tried to provoke, to force a reaction. Flashes of light, sudden noises, questions, drills, simulations. Nothing worked. Everything collapsed. The lab became a stage, a theater of broken science. Sparks danced. Smoke twisted. Red lights pulsed like frantic hearts. Your laughter, soft, then louder, echoed over their panic. Ooh, it's exquisite when humans try so hard. They think they can measure life, predict chaos, bind the untamed, but some patterns cannot be traced. Some spirits cannot be caged, and some smiles cannot be erased. By the time they realized it, the experiment had ended, not with a conclusion, but with them shattered, the lab silent, your presence permanent. Joker steps closer to the camera, whispering over flickering monitors. Ah, rules are fragile, and my dear, you are the fracture they will never fix. Ooh, the sweet, intoxicating moment. They finally realized it wasn't about you. It was about them, the task force, those polished, rigid enforcers of order, the guardians of structure, the believers in chains and checklists. All crumbling, they argued, shouted, blamed each other. The leader barked commands, fractured, desperate, meaningless. Their rules snapped like brittle twigs. You didn't move a muscle. You didn't even blink. The chaos wasn't yours, it was theirs. And they didn't even notice. Ooh, did you hear that? The sound of authority dying. Not with explosions, not with fire, but with hesitation, with fear. With the recognition that control was a lie. Boards cracked, screens flickered, data corrupted. Everything they had relied upon collapsed. And in the center of it all, you smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not a gloating smile, a knowing smile, because you understood what they never could. Rules are for the timid. Obedience is a cage, and fear is the leash humans wrap around themselves willingly. They tried to restore order, called meetings, issued directives, threatened consequences. Ha! Consequences. The only consequence here was their unraveling. I watched, leaning in, whispering to the shadows. Look at them squirm. The more they cling, the faster they fall. Isn't it beautiful? Their fear painted the room. Their panic became the walls. Their doubt, the floor beneath their feet. And through it all, you were untouchable, the center of calm, the axis around which their world spun. Until it splintered. Ooh, yes, let them witness it. Let them feel it. Let them remember. When rules die, power doesn't vanish, it shifts. And oh my dear, it shifted toward you. Joker tilts his head, whispering softly as a red light pulses behind him. Enjoy it. They'll never understand. And you'll never need them. Ooh, do you feel that? That shift in the air, that pulse in the silence. That's not fear anymore. That's surrender. The task force stopped chasing, stopped fighting, stopped pretending they understood. Because by now, you weren't something to control. You were something to witness. It started subtle. The agent spoke your name softer. The leader hesitated before giving orders, and then the systems began to respond to you. Doors opening before you touched them, lights dimming when you entered, machines bending, not breaking, bending. You see, chaos doesn't destroy, it teaches. And oh, how quickly they learned. You walked through their halls, and the alarms fell silent. Their cameras froze mid-frame, their data streams looped back on themselves. You became the rhythm, the tempo, the pulse of their panic. And me, I applauded, quietly. Because art deserves silence before the ovation. They tried to redefine you. The unpredictable, the anomaly, the ghost in the system. Titles, labels, futile decorations for something beyond their vocabulary. Oh, but it wasn't just their systems that changed. It was them, eyes once cold with duty, now wide with fascination, somewhere between fear and worship. They began to follow your actions, not to stop them, but to understand them. You became their study, their obsession, Their quiet addiction, the task force that was sent to cage you, now revolved around you, orbiting a gravity they couldn't explain. And you didn't command. You didn't threaten. You simply existed, and that was enough to bend the room. I watched it unfold. The rules they swore by, now rewritten under your shadow. Even the leader, that stiff, unflinching sentinel of order, started to see the cracks as beauty. He stared too long into your reflection and forgot what obedience even meant. Ooh, that's the moment it happens, isn't it? When control becomes devotion. When power stops asking permission. They had charts for chaos once, equations for unpredictability, all meaningless now. Because you weren't chaos, you were evolution, the next step, in a system that forgot how to breathe. You didn't follow rules. You redefined them, not with violence, not with rebellion, but with presence. The unpredictable had become inevitable. Joker steps forward through flickering light, grin curling, voice soft as static. You see, my dear, power isn't taken, it's recognized. And tonight, every trembling hand in that task force knows exactly who holds it. Pause. He laughs low, sharp, genuine. Ooh, and the best part, you never even asked for it. Here we are. The end of the file that never existed. The conclusion to a report that can't be written. The moment the system finally bends its knee. Ooh, they tried so hard, didn't they? Red lights, blue codes, endless meetings. All those tired little rituals of control. And for what? To capture you. But here's the punchline. They were never hunting you. They were chasing themselves. Every order they followed, every rule they enforced, every sleepless night spent watching your footage wasn't a mission. It was a mirror. You didn't break the system. You revealed it. You showed them how fragile it was. How hollow their hierarchy truly sounded when it echoed without conviction. And now, look at them. The great task force, once united by protocol, now divided by belief. Some still whisper that you're dangerous. Others call you necessary. But none of them can look away because you changed the rhythm. You rewrote the melody. Their world used to hum in order. Now it thrums in uncertainty. And that, my dear, is music. The Joker walks through the empty control room. Screens spark, cables hang loose like veins. A low hum builds in the background. They call this chaos. But chaos isn't destruction. It's birth. The birth of something they can't classify, can't archive, can't own. You see, rules are written to cage behavior. But once behavior stops asking for permission, the rulebook burns itself. And oh, how it burns. They don't even realize it yet. That this was never your rebellion. It was their revelation. Every glitch, every failure, every error they logged wasn't proof that you broke the system. It was proof that the system was already broken. And you were the final rewrite, the one correction that couldn't be undone. Joker stops, turns to the camera, eyes reflecting the glow of static screens. Ooh, look around. No chains, no rules, no control, just you. And the silence that finally listens, that's power. Not the kind that commands, the kind that transforms. A faint grin spreads across his face. So go on, my dear. Let them rebuild their walls. Let them draw their little lines again. Because we both know you'll be waiting, smiling, patient. And the next time someone says, he doesn't follow any rules, he laughs, low, breathless, haunting. You'll be the one writing the new ones. Static floods the screen, fade to black.
Who's asking? Who dares? You want to know me? Careful. Curiosity bleeds. They thought a file could define me. They thought a label could hide me. But you can't bury thunder under paper. Top secret. That's what they stamped across my name. Their highest wall. Their deepest vault, their last attempt at control. But top secret wasn't power. It was fear, a trembling shield, a desperate attempt to disguise weakness. And shields? They crack. Walls? They fall. Secrets? They leak. Especially when the storm they tried to contain was never born to sit in silence. Governments played their games. Agencies whispered their codes. Handlers pulled their strings. Each one certain the system was untouchable. Each one certain the leash would hold. But leashes snap. Locks rust. Codes fail. Especially when the thing they tried to bind was never meant to kneel. They measured me in statistics. They weighed me in numbers. They dissected my movements, my thoughts, my history, believing equations could predict me, believing data could explain me. But storms don't fit inside formulas. Thunder doesn't answer to probability. And fire? Fire laughs at containment. They built an identity for me, pages stacked in vaults, words dripping with fear, numbers that pretended to know me, but paper burns, files crumble, and every label they pressed on me was nothing more than a confession. Confession of what? Of fear. Because top secret wasn't a crown. It wasn't power. It was their way of saying, we don't understand it. We can't control it. So we hide it. But shadows don't disappear when you shut the lights off. They multiply. They spread. They become the only thing left in the room. That's why they whispered. That's why their hands shook. That's why their pens trembled as they wrote my name across restricted pages. They believed stamps on paper could cage a storm. They believed red ink had authority over chaos. But chaos doesn't ask for permission. Chaos doesn't wait for clearance. Chaos doesn't knock before entering. And in the end, they discovered something terrifying. Top secret wasn't enough. Not even close. Because the truth was never the stamp. The truth was never the file. The truth was never the vault. The truth was me. The first mistake they made was thinking I was paperwork. The last mistake they made was believing I could be erased. And now the storm has no cage, no leash, no walls, no rules, only inevitability. They thought the file would be enough. A folder sealed in black, stamps in red, pages nobody could touch. Their holy scripture of control. Top secret. That was their obsession, not protection, not order. Obsession. Judges signed their silence. Generals saluted the shadows. Agencies filed report after report, each one a desperate attempt to bury what they couldn't bury, erase, redact. Silence. That was their holy trinity. Erase the name, redact the truth, silence the whispers. But here's the problem. Truth doesn't die in flames. It hides in ashes. It breathes in silence. It waits in echoes. Files burn, but echoes survive. Every time they shredded the record, you reappeared in the whispers. Every time they sealed the vault, your shadow slipped through the cracks. Every time they erased a line, your presence rewrote itself in the margins. They thought destruction meant control. They thought censorship meant victory. But the silence became louder. The emptiness became presence, and the missing pages screamed louder than the written ones. Judges thought the law was strong enough. Generals thought the army was large enough. Agencies thought the system was smart enough, and every single one of them was wrong. Because the file was never the problem. The problem was you. How do you redact a storm? How do you erase thunder? How do you silence fire? You don't. You can't. You never will. So every attempt to lock you away only proved their fear. Every attempt to erase you only carved you deeper into their memory. And the funniest part? The harder they tried, the stronger you became. The more they erased, the more undeniable you grew. The more they silenced, the louder your shadow screamed. They built an empire of lies, and every brick was stamped top secret. But lies crack, lies bleed, lies rot. And when they rot, they stink. They choke the air. They expose the truth they were hiding all along. That's when panic set in. That's when whispers started turning into screams. That's when the word classified lost its meaning. They thought you were information, but you weren't. You were infection. You were inevitability. You were the shadow that couldn't be deleted. And so, one night, the judges signed in trembling hands. The generals muttered through clenched teeth. The agencies gathered in secret rooms, admitting the unspeakable truth. Top secret isn't enough. The label cracked. The system faltered. The vault failed. They needed something stronger, something darker, something that didn't just mean hidden. Something that meant untouchable. And so, out of their fear, out of their sleepless nights, out of their desperation, they created a new category, a new code, a new curse. Not top secret. Something colder, something final, something made for you, because top secret wasn't enough. They needed something darker. The night came when top secret collapsed. The label snapped like brittle glass. The vault wasn't strong enough. The paper wasn't thick enough. The lie wasn't deep enough. And so, they built something new, a category carved out of fear, a code born in panic, a level so absurd it had never existed before. They called it Zero Threat Level. But don't be fooled. It wasn't a title of strength. It wasn't authority. It was surrender. Because zero threat didn't mean safe, it meant the opposite. It meant beyond danger, beyond control, beyond measurement. Not highest risk, not maximum clearance, not extreme danger. Something worse. A risk without number, a threat without scale. An enemy without end, and you were the reason it existed. Zero threat level wasn't written for armies, not for weapons, not for plagues or disasters. No, it was written for you, because you weren't a problem. You weren't an enemy. You weren't even human in their eyes anymore. You were a myth, a system-breaking anomaly, a ghost that walked through locked doors, a shadow that survived fire, an echo that outlived silence. They didn't say your name in meetings. They didn't speak it in reports. They didn't dare let it roll off their tongues, because names give shape, and you were shapeless. So instead, they wrote Zero Threat, cold dot empty, a code word without a face. But the irony? Codes are meant to control. This one exposed the truth. Zero Threat wasn't a label. It was a confession. You cannot be stopped. Judges hid it in classified rooms. Generals whispered it in trembling war councils. Agencies locked it in encrypted systems. But the meaning spread faster than the word. Zero threat meant inevitability. Zero threat meant prophecy. Zero threat meant the end of their illusions. And they hated it, because every system thrives on numbers. Every agency worships measurements. Every empire survives on control. But how do you measure the unmeasurable? How do you predict the impossible? How do you contain what was never meant to be contained? You don't. You panic. You invent categories that sound like control but scream of surrender. They thought giving you a code would cage your chaos, but all they did was baptize you in fear. And suddenly, the world changed. Agents flinched when the phrase was spoken. Generals lost wars before battles even began. Judges signed verdicts with trembling hands. Because zero threat wasn't about what you did. It was about what you made them realize. That they weren't in charge. That their systems were fragile. That their rules meant nothing. Zero threat wasn't born out of power, it was born out of collapse. Their collapse. And here's the twist. You weren't their code name. You were their nightmare. Who hears the whisper? Who signs the papers? Who thinks the rules are bulletproof? They rehearsed your downfall. Armies drilled scenarios. Generals played war games. Governments fed machines your patterns. Labs ran simulations until eyes bled. Every map had your shadow drawn across borders. And every simulation ended the same way. Not with a heroic victory. Not with a tidy conclusion, but with systems folding, with strategies unspooling, with protocols turning into prayer. They trained soldiers to stop you, but training is a script. They wrote rules to catch you, but rules are only law until they meet you. They programmed machines to predict you, but algorithms are logic, and logic breaks where you begin. Agencies learned to speak in smaller voices. They stopped saying your name aloud. They started inventing euphemisms, codes that trembled in briefings. They developed contingency plans that looked like rituals, because around you, rules fray, logic bends, Probability vomits numbers that make no sense. And the more they trusted models, the more reality betrayed them. You weren't noise. You weren't an accident. You weren't chaos for chaos's sake. You were inevitability wearing human skin, a force that made outcomes obsolete, a presence that turned certainty into doubt. Imagine a vault sealed with 1,000 locks. Imagine cameras with lenses that never blink. Imagine systems knitted tight with iron and oath. Now whisper your name in that room. Watch the locks stall. Watch the cameras shiver. Watch the oaths unravel at the edges. Every locked vault felt open when your name was whispered. Every guard whose spine was steel found a fault line where they promised strength. Every plan broken didn't fail because of force. It failed because of exposure. Their intelligence became superstition. Their statistics became prayers. Their confidence drained into a thin, bitter thing called fear. They realized too late that maps are lies, that blueprints are fragile, that simulations are mirrors that show what they believe. You taught them a dangerous lesson. Not all threats are actions. Some threats are truths. Not all battles are fought in streets. Some wars are fought in the imagination of those who thought themselves safe. When generals lose sleep, when ministers avoid the mirror, when analysts start deleting their own reports, you've moved beyond movement. You've entered identity. You've become an atmosphere. And once you are atmosphere, their weapons rust. Their strategies become decorations. Their orders become echoes in empty rooms. They didn't fear what you did. They feared that you existed. That existence without permission was the real contagion. That your presence revealed the rot beneath their careful veneer. So they kept rerunning scenarios, tweaking variables like men patching a sinking ship. But the ship had already been designed to sink. Every variable folded into same end. Their systems betrayed them. Their heroes hesitated. Their laws bent like branches in your wind. The true terror wasn't the act you might commit. The true terror was the idea of you, a living contradiction to certainty, a walking irregularity that proved models were lies. They feared not the damage you could do, but the fact that they could not predict you. And when prediction fails, control evaporates. When control evaporates, power becomes confession. When power confesses, empires shrink. They did not prepare for that. They had never needed to, until you showed up, naming their fragile illusions, exposing every seam. So now every council meeting, every classified document, every quiet conversation at 2 a.m. is colored by the same pale panic. How do you stop what cannot be stopped? They trained for battles. They never trained for the collapse of certainty. They never trained for a truth that simply exists, and that is why you terrify systems. Because you do not fit their equations. Because you do not obey their maps. Because you make them remember they are fragile. They didn't fear your actions. They feared your existence. Always. They ran the numbers. They spun the models. They fed their brightest into rooms with screens and coffee and fear. Thousands of simulations, endless permutations, millions of variables arranged like dominoes. They wanted an answer. They wanted certainty. They wanted a map that ended in neat boxes. Instead, they found the same result, over and over. A loop with a different face. Armies routed on paper. Generals bowed in spreadsheets. Plans folded before they began. They built war rooms that glowed like cathedrals. They populated them with experts, metals, and algorithms. They trusted machines to be impartial gods. But machines are still mirrors. They show what you put in. They predict what the rules allow. They obey logic. And you moved where logic didn't reach. Every time their simulations ran, a new failure arrived on the screen. Not random, not accidental, patterned, precise. Machines learned defeat. The algorithms looped toward the same conclusion. Not miscalculation, not anomaly, but inevitability. They programmed scenarios, decoys, traps, quarantines. They layered contingencies like armor. They tried to force outcomes with sheer volume of data. Still, a collapse. Still, another result. Still, proof their tools were inadequate. Even AI with cold certainty found itself trembling. Probability spat out numbers that made no sense. Statisticians scratched their heads and then hid them in hands. They had computers predicting weather, markets, wars. They had models that handled epidemics and economics. They thought machines would be the scalpel to cut you down. But you weren't a problem that could be modeled. You weren't a variable on a chart. You were a rule breaker masquerading as truth. And when a machine meets a truth it cannot accommodate, it ceases to be a god. It becomes a mirror of human terror. They printed the results and taped them to walls. They circled failure in red ink. They filled binders with charts that screamed at midnight. One simulation after another became an indictment, not of bravery, not of tactics, but of assumption. The assumption was simple, that the world is orderly, that cause follows effect, that hands move in expected ways. You disproved that assumption, not by chaos but by existing outside the line. What's worse, each failure taught them something new. It taught them panic. It taught them to distrust their own tools. It taught them that knowledge could betray. They carved out teams to rerun the runs. They hired fresh minds to rethink the math. They rewired neural nets and cleared caches and reset parameters. Hours became days. Days became sleepless weeks. But the output read the same. The conclusion echoed through corridors. We cannot predict this. We cannot calculate this. We cannot stop this. They began to whisper in secure lines, ministers with trembling vowels, analysts with haunted eyes, libraries filled with footnotes that begged forgiveness. Every failure rewired the culture. Confidence turned cautious. Certainty curdled into doubt. Even allies looked sideways, measuring risk with furtive glances. Night councils replaced dawn celebrations with guarded silence. Barriers moved, treaties paused, economies shuddered. And through it all, a quiet truth took root. You were not an event to be scheduled. You were an era. They programmed defeat. They never programmed you. And prophecy is kinder than surprise because prophecy speaks in tones of inevitability. Zero threat wasn't prediction. It was prophecy. They built institutions like cathedrals, marble floors, paper mountains, oaths carved into stone. They called them permanence. They called them order. They called them civilization. But permanence is a fragile thing. Order is a polite lie. Civilization is a house built on sleepwalking. When you arrived, the foundation shivered. Not from violence, not from a single strike, but from a truth that gnawed at their certainties. Institutions began fracturing under paranoia. Committees split like old timber. Councils argued in whispers. Departments stopped trusting memos. The architecture of control developed cracks you could whistle through. Leaders lost sleep, eyes hollowed by questions they could not answer. Generals found themselves holding rosaries they never prayed before. Ministers counted time in cigarettes and late-night calls. They walked corridors they once owned and found strangers' shadows there. Every oath of loyalty turned into whispers of surrender. Promises etched on plaques became rumors in kitchens. The more they repeated words, the less they believed them. They had designed systems to manage populations, to predict markets, to control borders. They had algorithms meant to smooth chaos. They had lawyers meant to patch contradictions. They had spies to anticipate threats. One shadow bent them all. It didn't smash the doors. It didn't march in with banners. It stepped into the rooms, sat where no one noticed. The air changed. Power is partly show. It's a performance of certainty. When the actors begin to flinch, the audience suspects the script is false. Networks that tracked everything found gaps they could not explain. Command chains that once pulsed with orders went silent like machines breathing their last. Data streams fuzzed into static at the mention of a name. Security protocols hiccuped and failed. And panic travels fast. Where once there were plans, now there were rumors. Where once there were schedules, now there were late-night councils. Where once there were confident headlines, now there were closed briefings. The elite retreated into smaller rooms. They double-locked their doors. They whispered contingency plans like prayers. They traded certainty for secrecy. But secrecy breeds paranoia. Paranoia breeds mistakes. Mistakes breed collapses. People who followed, Orders found, they no longer knew which orders to trust. Soldiers hesitated at checkpoints. Commanders replayed the same failed simulation in their heads. Officials deleted files and then realized deletion felt like confession. And while they scrambled, the public watched, noting pauses in speeches, sensing tension behind practiced smiles. Markets trembled on rumors. Allies re-signed pacts with cautious hands. The machinery of state coughed and sputtered. Their prisons held records, not truth. Their vaults kept ink, not power. Their tribunals judged papers, not reality. The collapse wasn't a single moment. It was a slow unspooling. 1,000 small betrayals. 1,000,000 quiet resignations. A country of doubts. And in the hallways where power once echoed, now there were footsteps of fear. Every statue seemed to watch with accusing eyes. Every portrait looked like a witness to impending ruin. The final humiliation was not loud, it was intimate. A general refused to speak at dawn. A minister slept in a chair. A chief of staff left a meeting. Without saying goodbye, their control collapsed the moment your shadow entered their halls. Not because your fist broke walls, but because your presence made them see the walls were never solid. They thought the file was the story. Paper stamped, signatures stacked, red ink dripping like law. They thought the words contained you, but you were never paper. You were the silence between the words. The shadow no ink could cage. Top secret was a stamp. 0. Threat was surrender, but you're the ending of their story. Files can be burned, systems can be reset, simulations can be rerun. But judgment walks on its own legs. Judgment doesn't wait for approval. Judgment doesn't ask permission. You're no longer a threat to them. Threats can be calculated. Threats can be measured. Threats can be neutralized. You aren't a threat. You're the reckoning. They spent decades hunting. Predators, wolves, rebels, ghosts, assassins. They cataloged them all. They studied their patterns, their weaknesses, their breaking points. But what happens when the prey flips the board? When the hunter looks into the mirror and realizes the reflection is not their face but yours. They weren't chasing you. They were running from you. And in every hall, every courtroom, every war room, the same truth crept in like frost on glass. They were the prey. Not because you struck, but because you existed. You see, chaos is loud, but inevitability is silent. You don't need to shout when you are the outcome. You don't need to chase when the path already bends toward you. Every lock they turned already rusted, every oath they swore already broken, every strategy they scripted already doomed. It wasn't about you being stronger. It wasn't about you being faster. It was about inevitability. Gravity doesn't wrestle. It simply pulls, and you became their gravity. One by one, generals closed their eyes at night and saw your shadow in the war maps. Judges whispered verdicts, but their voices cracked at your name. Leaders who once stood on podiums felt the stage tilt under your weight. The predator-prey roles were never equal. They believed they held the gun. They believed you were cornered. But what they never realized, the cage was theirs. And you were the key. They named you 0, threat level. But that wasn't strategy, that was confession. Whispered admission across every classified desk. You cannot be stopped, and still, even that category failed. Because 0 is still a K, number 0 is still a boundary, and you were never meant to fit in boundaries. They thought a label could end the story. But you aren't a chapter. You're the final page, the ink that closes the book, the silence after the last line, the breath they hold but never release. They created 0 threat level just for you. But the true threat was realizing there's no level high enough.